Hello, everyone. As all of you may know or may not know, we've been meeting as a group with different pastoral council members for St. John's. It was myself and Anita Four to develop. We were given the opportunity to develop a more unified parish council from the Archdiocese. It was a task given to Father Sean. So we've been meeting since last fall. Some of the goals we had for this was to basically simplify things for Father as well as the parish council itself. Currently, the parish council completes a lot of the same similar activities throughout the different parishes, but the responsibilities are really not that way, which makes things very challenging for Father to manage. We did look at multiple things as far as what worked well at the different parish council or different parishes as well as parishes outside of our region. As we went through the process, we had a lot of homework from Father to really dive deep into what would work out best for the region as a whole, as well as for each individual parish maintaining our own identity. So I feel we ended up with the best solution possible. We ended up with establishing 3 different groups: a buildings and ground, a finance, and still maintaining a smaller group of parish council members. So Father will go into some more detail, talking about those, the process and also how things worked out in the end. So you'll see that here coming up. So thank you, and if you guys have any questions, please feel free to contact me or any other parish council member as well. So thank you.
Well, thanks for that introduction. And so we're here today to talk about our pastoral council, our committees, and what that looks like. But if we look in the throughout the scriptures, there's this great story of Moses and the Exodus. As Moses is leading the people out of Egypt, and as they're getting towards the promised land, Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, comes up to him, and it's just a great name. So if I ever get to baptize a child, Jethro, that'd be a great name. But Jethro comes to his son-in-law Moses, and he says, Moses, you're basically killing yourself, right? You're trying to judge all these cases. Everybody's bringing things to you, and it's too much. Like you're getting burdened, you're getting overwhelmed. And so Moses then he encourages Moses to gather 72 people around him to help him. And so Moses gives these people the ability to kind of judge the lesser serious cases, but if there's anything like disputes between them or how they're going to feed everybody or whatever. And then the heavier things they bring to Moses. And that's like a great little insight that Moses realizes he can't do everything himself. And so he gathers these people around him to help him. And I think that has to be kind of how we live our life in the church in so many ways, because sometimes, well, of course, like the pastor in many ways is the face of the parish, but if he tries to do everything himself, it's just going to be tragic. Nothing's going to get done. There's going to be so many issues. And so there's these co-workers. For, maybe the everyday co-workers is the staff that's there. But then also there's our leadership in councils and committees and those who have expertise in their own lives and they can see things, they kind of hear what's going on with the people. And so we have these councils and these committees to advise the pastor, to help in different ways in different areas of parish life. So maybe that's just like that's a baseline of kind of just a reflection on what Moses and how he and his father-in-law encouraged him to lead. And so one of the things the church has given us is a pastoral council. And that's been the last 50 years. A pastoral council has been encouraged at each parish throughout the entire world. And then in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, it's been a requirement for the past, I don't know how many years, probably, I think since 1972, but don't quote me on this. And so the church gives us a little bit in her canon law about what the role of a pastoral council is. So it says this: a pastoral council is to be established in each parish over which the pastor presides and in which the Christian faithful, together with those who share in pastoral care by virtue of their office in the parish, assist in fostering pastoral activity. A pastoral council possesses a consultative vote only and is governed by the norms established by the diocesan bishop. So there's a handful of things that are going on there about a pastoral council being established in each parish, and then the norms given by the bishop. So we've been given, there's a long document that the Archdiocese of Cincinnati put out, I think it was in the late 90s, maybe the early 2000s, about a pastoral council. And so, of course, as we're plunging through this, we use that as a lot of guidance. And so it's to foster, notice one other thing, to foster the pastoral activity in the parish. So it's to foster the parish council, to foster the action of the parish, to go out and to spread the good news, to celebrate the sacraments, to worship God. So that's kind of the baseline of the pastoral council. And it gives the people a great chance to take ownership in the parish, that they don't have to sit back and watch some authoritarian just do whatever he thinks is best. But it gives this ability to consult, this ability to hear things that maybe a pastor wouldn't hear because people don't always say everything. So it gives some great ears on the ground to consult. And so it allows people to kind of take ownership of their parish and to have that help with the guidance of it. So currently in our parishes, each parish already has a pastoral council, but some are a little different than others. And each one has a charter too. And all of the charters of the council, some are lengthier than others, some are very similar, like IC and St. Lawrence Council charters are very different, and each one has 7 people on their council for IC and St. Lawrence. St. Joseph currently has 9 people on their council, and St. John Freiburg has 8. So they each have one. These are up and running right now. And each parish also has a finance committee. I think everybody probably knows this, but they're really, as we look, pastoral councils, they're all kind of the same in our 4 parishes, but when we start moving to the finance committees, things get rather different between each parish. So, for example, the Immaculate Conception and St. Lawrence finance committees, each of them meet about 3 times a year, and it's basically whenever the pastor calls a meeting. And it's kind of on the pastor's job to call these meetings, to gather everybody and to figure out what time works. And that's kind of changed over these last few months. We've been scheduling for quarterly, and then I've kind of passed the buck a little bit on scheduling those meetings. The St. John Freiburg Council is currently meeting quarterly, but every now and then, quite a few times they've struggled to get a quorum. So there's just for whatever reason, schedules aren't working, so not being able to have enough people to even take a vote. So that's a bit of an issue. And then the St. Joseph Council has been meeting monthly, or at least they're trying to, and then there's that same issue they're having of getting the quorum, getting enough people there to take a vote. So, in a finance committee, whereas a pastoral council is actually suggested by the Universal Church, a finance committee has to happen in every parish throughout the world. And I guess that just shows to how many issues can come in with finances, to make sure there's a group of people looking over the finances, the temporal goods of the church are important. And if somebody gets in there who doesn't have anybody looking over their shoulder, sometimes, unfortunately, issues can happen. Again, with the finance committees, none of our finance committees have a charter right now. None of them have kind of a document that says this is what we're about, this is how things are supposed to run. So that's a bit of an issue that we're trying to solve. But like this, the Archdiocese has put out guidelines for a finance committee, and it's actually also in there is having a buildings and grounds committee. So in the document on the finance committee, there's a recommendation to have a buildings and grounds committee. Currently, St. Joseph is the only one that has a buildings and grounds committee. All right, and so currently, I guess the last thing that we could talk about the current structure is that the pastoral councils all meet together. The current meeting structure is we meet about 9 times a year. It's normally once a month, but we don't meet in December or July and August. So we all meet together as one big group, and generally this takes about 45 minutes or so, and then we break up into individual parishes, and then I try to pop between each meeting with the individual parishes and discuss whatever pertinent thing is going on there. So that's a bit of the current structure. That's how things are operating right now. And as we reflect on what's happening, we've kind of noticed some issues in this way things are operating. And I say issues, they're things that I kind of had a sense of, but you kind of know they're there, but you're like, now there's something's not working right, and what can we do about it? And of course, as there's issues, these are, sometimes when there's problems, we as human beings like to point blame. We like to say, well, it's this person's fault, or it's that person's, or it was, this pastor 40 years ago who canceled pastoral council, and it's never been the same. And I don't know what all those stories are, but I don't think there's any way that we can point any fingers, because it's just one of the challenges of having 4 separate parishes, and each one coming on at a different time, and each one having their own story, their own role, their own idea, their own kind of customs of how a pastoral council functions. So that's just the nature of the beast. It's nobody's fault or anything like that. But we have noticed there's some issues, and as we kind of dive into these, it's something that it's worth solving. Like, it's an important enough of a problem that I think we should probably address it. And I say probably, but I know we should address it. So here, just some of the issues that we've kind of noticed is, first of all, there's sort of a lack of direction of all of our pastoral councils to say, like, what is our role of a pastoral council? And you kind of see this in people who enter into pastoral council. There's this kind of this hope and this kind of joy, and there's like, I think we should do this and this and this. And then by the time 3 years get up, people are ready to get off. And in some ways, there's a sense of like dashed hopes that, I thought we could do something, but things didn't really turn out as I had hoped or as I thought they would be, and that's, it's kind of hard to see that. Like, when people's term is up, they're like ready to go. So there's that kind of, you see that in this lack of direction. And even some of the councils get overly focused on the buildings and the grounds, and that becomes some people's dejection. They're like, all we talked about was, paving a parking lot, or all we talked about was fixing the outside of the church, or selling a school, or like there's this just laser focus on buildings and grounds, and then some of the other pastoral activity didn't get discussed or didn't get investigated. One of the other kind of general directional issues is I've noticed that there's no body of our parishioners that can advise me on region-wide issues. So most of the councils, they kind of focus on their own parish, and there's nobody that's going to take that further step back and say, well, we have to look at this from an entire region. We have to look at this and say, well, what's the best thing for all of our parishes together? So that's kind of an issue, that we don't have any group that's helping me to, other than the staff, of course they do a great job, but of our parishioners to say, well, how is this working as an entire region? And then the last kind of general pastoral council issue is that, in this lack of direction, is that there's some issues with getting members. And sometimes people, they do their 3 years, they've been through, and some parishes, they kind of cycle through the same people. When we're talking about, well, who would want to be on pastoral council? It's, well, this person hasn't done it in about 5 years. Maybe they're ready for a second trip. And sometimes people are like, nah, I'm not going there again. So there's these kind of issues of getting numbers. So this kind of general lack of direction of our councils. So that's one issue with the current way things go. A second issue that we've noticed is that the pastoral council meetings aren't working. So when we gather the whole large group of pastoral council members for the region-wide meeting, there's like 30 people at that meeting, and sometimes there's staff members and other people that are there for different reasons. And if you've ever tried to have a discussion with 30 people, it's tough. And people are afraid to speak. And you even see this. So sometimes people they're ready to get to their own individual meetings, so they won't speak up in the midst of 30 people. Or you don't know who this person is, you don't know, you're not willing to kind of to speak up because it's such a big group. So there's some issues with having everybody present, and anybody who's been part of a 30 group, our 30-member group knows that it's super challenging, and then there's those whole issues of itching to get to a different meeting, so people don't want to prolong the region-wide meeting. So that's a bit of an issue. And then the other thing with the pastoral council meetings issue is when we break apart into our individual parishes, and as the pastor tries to pop from one meeting to the next, without a doubt, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 times that I've been able to make it to all 4 parishes before everybody, has wrapped up and gone home. So that's a bit of an issue, not being able to be present for those meetings. So those are kind of the issues with the pastoral council meetings as they're currently structured. Another issue that we've noticed is communication. Communication between the different, between the pastoral council and the finance council, or the buildings and grounds. That there's, what's the old saying? The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And so sometimes the communication between the committees and the staff is poor. So it's, you think about who's in charge of getting a bid for a project. Is it the staff member, or is it the pastoral council, or is it the buildings and grounds? Whose responsibility is that? And when there's a lack of clarity, there can sometimes be well, I thought they were supposed to do that. I thought they were supposed to do it. Or from our contractors' end, sometimes it's I've got 3 different people contacting me about this job. Who am I supposed to talk to? So this kind of lack of communication. And then even there's maybe a different spin. If that's the internal communication between the councils and the committees, sometimes there's an external communication that some of the parishioners don't know what sort of committees we have, what sort of councils we have, what they do. They think pastoral council is supposed to do that, and it's actually, well, that's the finance committee. So it's kind of external communication with the parish at large, which, hopefully this video is going to help with that. So we'll see. All right, a 4th issue that we've kind of come across is the charters themselves, these documents that are supposed to guide the activity of these different groups, just some of them being out of date. For example, one of the parishes' pastoral council charter has not been updated since 1973, which that's a while ago, I'll just say that. I tried to do the math in my head, but I think we're approaching 50 years. Another one of the council's charters had not been modified since we went to the all 4 councils meeting together. So that one had been out of date. And then our finance committees didn't have any written council, our charter. They didn't have any written document to guide their discussion. So all the charters were different levels of out of date or non-existence. That's the charter's a bit of an issue to try to, and it's a lot of it, what we're doing are the issues, is there's just a lack of clarity about what's our role, what's their role, what are we supposed to be about. And I think all of us know when there's a clarity about what our roles are, there's a confidence that comes with that, and there's a really ability to work if you know what our task is and what their task is, and we can delegate that way. And then the last issue that we kind of talked about is just the administration for the priest. If the priest is supposed to be at, all 4 pastoral council meetings, all 4 finance council meetings, buildings and grounds meetings, all of these different things, there's nothing else that's going to get done, right? If we have all of these evening meetings, there's going to be no evening to teach RCIA. There's going to be no evening to hear confessions. There's going to be no evening to give a talk about whatever's going on, the parish feast day or whatever it may be. And then even, we don't know what the future holds. We hopefully, at this time, we're planning on getting a new associate. This is April 2020. Father Jared, we know, is moving on to Holy Angels. We're planning on getting a new associate. We don't know what 3 years holds. We don't know what 5 years holds. And if there is just one priest for our 4 parishes, we're really going to have to make sure we know the roles and we're able to pass some of these bucks off so that he can do the sacramental stuff, the teaching stuff. So that's one of the things that we really want to do in this, is to make sure we can kind of lift that load a little bit and pass it to people who, in all honesty, are a lot more competent than me about budgeting, about, how do we work with a contractor and all those sorts of things. So letting the parishioners do what they're good at and let me do what I've been trained to do. So we had these issues that came up. We kind of had these things that we were noticing, or at least I was kind of noticing in that first year as the pastor back in 2019-20 to 2020. Actually, that was 2018 to 2019. Sorry, this coronavirus thing is making all the time just fuzzy all over. So we started to take some steps towards change. And I didn't have these issues as clearly written out, but I kind of had a sense of some of them. And then I talked to one of the priests who works closely with the archbishop. And he has some experience of being pastor of parishes in difficult situations. So I said, well, what do we do about this? I mean, what are your thoughts? I'm trying to figure things out. And he came back and said, and I was like throwing around, do we have one council, or what was that? Is this something we could try? And he came back and said, well, the archbishop would like you to give this a shot, to give a shot with one council to see how this would work, and then to say to other parishes, this is how you can do it. This is how one group of 4 parishes did this, and so maybe in that way we could be a help to other parishes. I don't know. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. But so we were kind of given the green light to give this a shot for all four parishes. And so that was July of 2019, I believe. And so when Pastoral Council started in September, we had our first meeting for the year. I brought this up and kind of heard some initial feedback and some hesitations, whether it's lack of parish identity, or if we have a region-wide council, is that just creating another level of bureaucracy and another level? Sometimes the communication even worsens. But one thing that really encouraged me at that first September meeting is that they were willing to try it, willing to discuss, because I think in different levels people had felt that there's some sort of issue, that this could be better, that things could run smoother. And so there was that kind of that hope in that September meeting. There were some hesitancies, but they said, well, it's worth giving a shot. And so we did. So we formed a committee to work on this project. There was 2 people from each parish, and then another staff member, Cindy Quellhorse, was there. Deacon Nick Jurasic came in and out and helped there. And so we kind of had this process that I think, honestly, I've been to a number of parish meetings, but I don't think it was as consistent that every meeting we came out of, I felt like we had accomplished something. That every time we kind of packed things up after an hour and 15 minutes, I thought, all right, we got some stuff done. We had great conversation, and I think we're really getting somewhere. So it was one of the best groups to be a part of. I mean, a lot of times you think, well, meeting, this is a drag, but it was like, all right, we're going to go here. We've got stuff we need to solve, and we're going to do it. And everything went pretty well. So the process was, we first nailed down these issues. So the issues that I talked about, like I said, they weren't nearly as clear as when we first stepped into this. But that first meeting, we kind of hashed it out, and then we went to the other committees. We went to the finance committees, we went to the buildings and grounds, we went to pastoral councils and said, what issues do you see? How are things running? Are they running well or are they not? What's good, what's bad? How are things operating? And so we gathered all that information. And all the people on the committee did a great job of gathering that information. So we did that, and that was step 1. Step 2 was the research, to say, okay, what is the role of these different committees? So we read through the document that the Archdiocese gives about pastoral council. We read through the one about finance committees. We read a part of a chapter of a book about somebody else's experience of pastoral council. And I gathered some other charters from different parishes, pastoral councils, and so we had some information, we had some ideas, we had some things to inform were going to do. And then from there, we said, okay, how's this going to work for our own parishes? How are we going to do this? So we did our research, and basically it was describing what's the role of each group. What's the role of each of these groups going to be? And I think it might be helpful just to say that as we kind of, we put up the whiteboards. What's the role of pastoral council? What's the role of finance committee? What's the role of the buildings and grounds? So anyways, as we try to figure out what's the role of each group, we figured pastoral council is first going to be prayerful, to kind of discern where God is leading the parish. And then there's and these are in no specific order. There's a requirement in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati that any expenditure over $25,000, the pastoral council has to be consulted and give their vote, whether yay or nay. And then the pastoral council represents the people. So if there's issues going on in the parish, the pastoral council is kind of the representatives who can bring that to the pastor. But then also, in some ways, they represent the pastor. So if things are going on and, like these decisions are made, they can be the pastor's voice in some ways in the trenches. They can be the pastor's voice at a festival or at a sporting event, even when a parishioner comes to talk about an issue. So in some ways, they can represent the pastor. Also, the pastoral council gathers feedback. Maybe that means they need to call a handful of different parishioners to see, well, what's kind of your take on this? Where do you think people stand? And then also to help with the long-term planning, to kind of articulate the vision, to see what the goals are of the parish, and then how are we going to reach those goals? What are the concrete actions and priorities that we need to do? And even once that big plan's kind of been decided or been reflected upon, to come back. If it's a 3-year plan, to take a year into it to say, okay, how are we doing on that? Are we doing well? And then even to evaluate the pastoral council. Well, if this is what we're supposed to be about, what buildings do we need? What do we need to do? Do we need to have? If we're investing in the future generations, what sort of bathrooms do we need? We got that going on at Freiburg now. If we want to have the kids out there or make it a place where families gather, what sort of even Johns do we need? Shouldn't have used the word Johns. So, anyways. And even to be this sort of pastoral council, to be the liaison between the finance committee, the pastoral council, to kind of keep everybody in the loop. And then even to be a council, to be like a sounding board, to say, all right, the staff is thinking like, maybe this is a direction we need to go. This is something we should do. Let's go to pastoral council. Let's kind of get their impact. We're going to make this adjustment to whatever, the extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion. Maybe that's not the best example. Or maybe even like the CCD program. We need to figure out what times things are going to start, or the age of confirmation. So to kind of be that sounding board for the staff and their different ideas. So that's kind of the role in a quick overview of the role of pastoral council. Finance committee, first you got to know what the goals are, what the parish is supposed to be about, and then to assist the pastor and the staff in setting that annual budget, to review the annual report, and then to communicate that report to the parishes. I think we're used to seeing that at Mass once a year. And then even to review some of that financial activity of auxiliary groups, such as, the cemetery, or we've got a ladies' sodality, to make sure all of those finances are doing well. And then even to review the internal financial controls of a parish. I remember I asked one finance committee one time, do you know how the money gets from the collection basket to being counted to being deposited in the bank? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And it's like, well, do we? So one of the things is to make sure those financial controls are happening, and that's why we've got a finance committee to help with that. And to maybe even help with hiring of people who are part of the finance. Like if I'm got to hire a new business manager, I don't know what things to ask. I don't know what what sort of accounting experience they may have. So it's always helpful. And then even to talk about fund drives. You know, you're doing this big campaign, finance committee, to kind of get on board to how to raise money or how to communicate that or pledges and all that. And then lastly, the role of a buildings and grounds committee to think about, and that's in some ways it's self-explanatory, but to regularly inspect the buildings, you know, to do some walkarounds, to see what needs some maintenance, what needs a little tender loving care, and what disasters could be on our hands that we really want to avoid. And that means working alongside with different staff members. That means working alongside even with myself too. And then even to have like a plan to say, okay, we have all of these needs with our maintenance. What's first priority? Like what do we need to do? And there's some dialogue that needs to happen with the finance committee. It's like, we have these 10 things we need to do. And the finance committee says, we can't do all of that at once. We don't have the money for that. Okay, let's prioritize. What is emergency? What is, yeah, it'd be nice if that was better, but we can wait. So to do some of that. So that's kind of the roles of each of these groups, and so that's what we were working with. And so we brought all of this to say, how is this going to work in our pastoral region? How is this going to work for all of our parishes? I have to say, it was a pretty daunting task when we sat down and think about it, because we had all of these issues that we wanted to solve, that we thought things aren't working, what can we do better? And then we're like, okay, each group has to focus on their own task. So how do we fix these issues, make sure each group can focus on their own task? And then to make sure that no individual parish loses their identity or loses their autonomy, because that was one of the issues, the initial feedback. People were worried, like, regional pastoral council, that means our parish is going to lose their identity. That was the immediate reaction. So it's something we had to consider. So it was a pretty challenging task. But as we thought about it, as we reflected upon it, I think we came up with a pretty good model. And so hopefully you can see that up on the screen right now. And I know it just looks like a bunch of circles and squares and a bunch of initials for things. So as you can look at the top there and so each parish is kind of color coordinated. So there's a red parish, a blue parish, a green parish, a yellow parish. And so you can kind of see each individual parish, what each one is going to have. So at the top is a regional pastoral council. And each parish has 3 people on that council. And so it's more like the Senate than the House of Representatives. It's not a different number of people or a different number of representatives based on how many people in the parish, but it's based upon each parish having the same representation. Side note, 12 seemed like a very fitting number because, of course, 12 apostles, 12 tribes of Israel, just made sense. So each parish is going to have 3 members on the regional pastoral council. So the regional pastoral council, and we're planning on that meeting quarterly, and then so you can follow like each individual column. So each parish then is going to have their own finance committee. And you can see that on the finance committee, there's going to be a head. We'll probably call that the chair of the finance committee. When we originally did this, for some reason, the word chair escaped me. But, that's okay. So there's a chair of the finance committee and 4 other finance committee members, 5 total. And then you see next to the finance committee, there's 2 squares. So those are non-voting members, but ones who are expected to be at each meeting. And one of them's PC. So the second-year pastoral council member is going to sit on the finance committee to help that communication between the pastoral council and the finance committee. So the first-year pastoral, or the third year, the most senior pastoral council member, we're going to call the senior member for that parish. The second-year person is going to represent the pastoral council to the finance committee. And then, as you could probably guess, the first-year pastoral council member is going to be on the buildings and grounds. So you can kind of see that on the finance committee and the buildings and grounds. There's a PC member there. That's a PC rep, basically. Also, there's a staff rep that's there. So a staff member that's going to sit on pastoral on those individual committees, on the finance committee and the buildings and grounds. And the idea there is that so that Father doesn't have to be at every single meeting, And so that they can be the eyes and the ears, and even their day-to-day experience. So the day-to-day experience of the staff member who's working with the budget or who's working with contractors, they're going to have that day-to-day experience that they can bring to those finance committee discussions. And if I can't be at the meeting, the idea is the next morning in the office to sit down and kind of say, this is what they talked about, Father, what do you think? Or what is this, everything sound good? Or to kind of do a rehash after that meeting. So you can kind of see then the finance and the buildings and grounds. As far as the meetings go, the idea is for each parish, their finance and buildings and grounds to meet on the same night. So they'll meet together because there's a lot of interrelated stuff that if they're not talking to each other can kind of get lost. So they'll meet together and then break apart into individual. So if there's any joint matters, they can talk about them. But then they can separate and say, okay, we kind of got the green light to replace all the gutters. Let's go out there, let's measure, we got these quotes, let's talk about them. So that each group can dialogue, but then they can have their own separate mission, I guess, their own sphere of what they're doing. So that's basically the gist of these individual parish finance committees and buildings and grounds. And so the finance committee and buildings and grounds are going to meet quarterly, and then so they'll all meet in the same month. So for example, May, we decided that buildings and grounds and finance should meet in May, because in May we're preparing the budget for the next year. So they're all going to meet in May, maybe one a week, or I think it was 2 the first week and 2 the third week. And then in June, the pastoral council is going to have their quarterly meeting. So they can take all of those discussions and they can kind of say, well, what do we need to discuss? Is there anything we need to discuss in this? And it'll be like that throughout the entire year. So 3 months after May, in August, the buildings and grounds and finance will meet. And then the following month in September, pastoral council will meet. So it's just that kind of way throughout the entire year. So we had this idea, and there's one issue that still kind of lingers, is the individual parish pastoral council. Right? We said that one of the things that the archdiocese requires is for the pastoral council to be consulted with any expenditure over $25,000. And those are big things, right? We think about IC, we did the parking lot at St. Joe, the sale of the school, the restrooms at St. John, the bricks, the tuck pointing at St. Lawrence. So these are big decisions. And people were worried that people from other parishes are going to tell them how they can spend this money, right? If the regional pastoral council says, well, I'm from this parish, I haven't been there since my grandma got buried there in 30 years, but hey, let me tell you how to spend money. Like that's a real legitimate concern. So we thought, how are we going to keep this kind of individual autonomy? And we decided that each parish is still going to retain their pastoral council, but it's going to be on an as-needed basis, but not to gather a whole new group of people, but to rather utilize those people who have already been part of the decision-making process. So you can see those like ovals, or maybe the rounded rectangles there around the 3 pastoral council meetings, or the 3 pastoral council members, the chair of the finance, the head, and the chair of buildings and grounds. So these 5 people are going to make up the individual parish pastoral council. So if something needs to be decided, or something needs to, a big thing, or even if there's something small, whatever that may be, that for example, maybe, a festival we're losing membership, we're struggling, we don't know if this is going to continue, the individual parish pastoral council can kind of pool all of their minds and their experience for their individual parish and work on that. So the individual parish pastoral council is going to meet on an as-needed basis, because sometimes these things, they need to meet maybe never in a year, but maybe they need to meet 5 times in a year because they're getting ready to do a major project. So that's going to be an as-needed basis. And the senior pastoral council member, so the 3rd-year pastoral council member, is going to be in charge of that. They'll say, hey, Father, I think we need to meet. I'm going to call the individual parish pastoral council because we've got this that just needs to be decided. So as we came up with this, I think it's a really great plan. I'm very happy with this, and it's pretty exciting. But one of the last things that we had to figure out was how to transition. How do we get from where we are to where we want to be? And a lot of things in the church change on July 1st. Priests start new assignments. The fiscal year starts on July 1st. So we decided this new model is going to take effect on July 1st. So one of the things with the transition is charters. So we wrote up the charters, and maybe excuse me. One of the best things with the charters is that they're short. So they're just front and back, easy to read. It's not going to be a 30-page document. And then the maybe even the better thing is that they were unanimously accepted by all the pastoral council members from every parish. So that's pretty exciting. So one of the other things that we had to do with pastoral council is we had to reduce the number of members. So, we're going to have 3 per parish. Some parishes have 9, some have 8, some have 7. So how do we get down to 3? Well, some of this just happens naturally because people, they were on their 3rd year on pastoral council. They're already planning on going off, so that makes it pretty easy. Some said, you know what, I think I would rather be on the finance committee. The finance committee needed some more people. I'm gonna volunteer to go there. And then, of course, that happened with buildings and grounds to say, actually, I just really like the building stuff, so I'm going to go to buildings and grounds. So that happened. And then some people said, you know what, I can't really make the commitment anymore. It was more than I thought, and I'm raising kids and I'm working and all of that, so I think I'm just going to step down in general. So basically, all that we need to fill is we need one person to serve on the St. Lawrence Pastoral Council. Otherwise, things kind of worked out and people wanting to move committees or wanted to step down or to go to or they were already going off. So it's all sort of working out, and St. Lawrence will kind of communicate that and about having another pastoral council member. One of the other things that we had to do in this transition is to launch a buildings and grounds committee at each parish. And one of the blessings with all of this is that we already have a lot of people that care about the buildings and grounds and that know. But from each of the pastoral councils, there was somebody that volunteered to be the chair of this, to kind of get it up and running for the new year. So, of course, St. Joe already has one, but the other 3 parishes, IC, St. John, St. Lawrence, somebody from pastoral council said, hey, I will take that baton. I'll do my best to get this launched. I'll work on gathering some other members. So if you're interested in serving on that committee, you can let us know. Some of them, I think one of the parishes pretty much filled up immediately. Pastoral council and other people had already been talking about it. So and you can put your name in the hat for the future. So if you're interested in the buildings and grounds for your parish, please give the office an email or a call. That's just office@petersburgparishes.org, and we'll get your name out there. The one other thing that we needed to do with this transition is to communicate, hence this video. Of course, we weren't planning on doing a video, but the pandemic happened. We were going to have a big meeting that everybody could come to and hear, but that's the way things go. So if you know somebody that needs to see this video, please forward the link to them. And yeah, so we're working on the communication, and this will be an ongoing thing. So it's pretty exciting. I was pretty excited with how all of this process worked. Like I said, those meetings were really kind of fulfilling. You felt like you were doing good work that's really going to last and bear fruit for years in our parishes. Because we really did, when we came up with this model and figured everything out, we went back to the problems that we had identified and said, well, did we solve them? And I think we did. I think we did a great job to solve them. And we did a great work of research. We looked at what different parishes are doing, what people who have done this have suggested. And then we tried to retain the individual parish identity. I mean, that was a challenge, but it's one worth fighting for. So I think we did a pretty good job of this. I know some people were kind of scared about this whole process when it was started, but I think ultimately it's going to help us decisions to be made quicker. People will be happier because they know what their role is. There's some more clarity, and things will move quicker. Because if everything relies on the pastor, it's going to be quicksand in the parishes, and it won't be good. So we came up with this, and like I said, we're going to start July 1st. Is it going to be perfect? I have no idea that it will be. I think as we probably go on for these next year or two, there'll be things, we should tweak this, we should change that. We thought we knew what we were doing, but this is actually going to work out a little better. But it's a step in the right direction. And I just want to end by saying I think it'll help us to focus on that vision of why we exist. Our parishes exist so that the deepest longings of people can be met by the deepest longings of Jesus Christ. And every decision that we make has to focus on this. And I think this will help us to clarify what we're about. And that vision can kind of filter down through all of these different groups because we communicate better. Because there's this emphasis on what we're about. Why do we have these buildings? So that the deepest longings of the people can be met by the deepest longings of Jesus Christ. And that's what we're about. And hopefully all of these different committees, the finances, the buildings, the vision, all of it can be centered on helping those two things come together. The love of people and the need for Jesus and his longing and love to be near each and every one of us. So thanks for watching. Feel free to share this. Feel free to pass on the information. Appreciate you tuning in for this. And God bless. Be assured of our prayers. And of course, we all look forward to the day when we can be back in our parishes to praise God together.